So it's 5:42 now, and I'm back from the hospital. I just changed my shirt and came directly down to the studio because this is the only time I get today to do some recording. So I saw it was my OPD day today. I mean, every day is my OPD day, but today is Monday, and it's when I get to see new patients. And today I saw 23 patients, and it was a mixed bag of emotions. So there was this one patient who stood out today. He was when he is 48 years old, and he was diagnosed with chronic liver disease, cirrhosis, only a couple of months back. But the reason why he was diagnosed was that he did not have any specific symptoms per se, but he was using alcohol for a very long time. And in fact, just 2 months back, he started developing some abdominal discomfort, low appetite, just for a couple of days, and then he decided that he'll show a general physician nearby, and that led to one thing, and that led to another thing, and ultimately he was diagnosed with chronic liver disease. That is, his liver was shrunken after daily use of alcohol for many years. But that was not all. The time they diagnosed him with cirrhosis, and he's just 48. He has two teenage kids. He stays with his wife. They stay close by to the hospital where I work. And the time that they diagnosed him with cirrhosis, they also found out that his liver had a large lesion, a large mass, a large nodule that was about 6 to 7 centimeters in size. And he was sent to me for that, to evaluate that nodule, that large liver mass. And what we found out was that it's not just a simple cirrhotic nodule. So there are multiple nodules that the liver can have once the liver turns cirrhotic. Those are nodules of failed regeneration. We call it as cirrhotic nodules. But some of these nodules can transform into cancers. And that is exactly what happened to this guy. And unfortunately, the diagnosis of cirrhosis was also along with the diagnosis of liver cancer. And it was not just a simple cancer, it was a quite aggressive one. All those non-specific signs and symptoms that he had was probably because his cancer was actually becoming symptomatic at that time. But it would have taken at least 6 months to grow, 6 months to a year to grow to the size that it was now, about 6 to 7 centimeters. And it had invaded almost all the blood vessels inside his liver, which meant that some of the major blood vessels supplying blood to the liver were also invaded and blocked by this tumor. But the liver has multiple blood supplies, so a large numbers of collaterals, we call it as collateral. So imagine a highway that is blocked, and then the cars and buses, they all take the side roads, the service roads or the bypasses to get to the destination. So when the liver main blood vessel is blocked, it creates bypasses or collaterals around the liver, so the blood flow does not get hampered. So this man had a large liver lesion. He had, and that was cancerous. It was proven on the CT scan, and it had spread inside the liver into his veins, the blood vessels, and gone out of the liver. And this was just at the time of diagnosis of his cirrhosis. He was in deep regret. So when we identified this liver cancer at the time, the option for him, I mean, the option for us to treat him was only with local therapy. So if somebody has cirrhosis and liver cancer, there are multiple options. It can range from a simple surgical removal of the tumor to a liver transplant. And there are a lot of things that one can do for these patients in between. For example, there are treatments known as ablative therapies, where small tumors can be burned from outside using sonic sound waves or using microwaves, which is known as radio frequency ablation or microwave ablation. Or you can target the large liver cancer through an angioplasty procedure, where we guide a wire into the blood vessel that is supplying the tumor, and then put in some chemotherapy medicines that will burn and destroy the tumor from inside. So that is known as a TACE, that is transarterial chemoembolization. Or we do something known as a transarterial radioembolization, which is for larger tumors which more expansion inside the liver or more spread inside the liver. So a tear is very expensive. TACE is also quite expensive. It can come up to about 1 to 1.5 lakhs. Along with admission, it can go up to 1.6 lakhs. This man had a stage of cancer where there was locally advanced cancer. So we were out of the TACE option. TARE is so expensive, about 12 to 13 lakhs. He could not afford it. A simple ablation won't work because it's a big tumor. You can't ablate the whole tumor using heat waves. So the only option left, what we do for our patients, is something known as a SABR, which is stereotactic body radiation therapy. SBRT is what we call it here. It's also known as SABR, stereotactic ablative body radiation. So what we do here is we focus a high beam of high level radiation focused only to that particular tumor, so that only the tumor part is affected, and predominantly rest of the liver part is actually spared from that radiation. So it's a pretty safe treatment to offer patients with advanced liver cancer, and it usually does not require admission, and you can do it on daycare basis, OPD basis. So since he was staying close by, he said that he'll come and do that. And so we started him on that about a month back, and he could arrange the money for that treatment for about the last 3 or 4 weeks. And then he started the treatment, and my radiation oncologist called me and said that he can't do this any further. He's finished 3 sessions, another 2 sessions are left pending, but um, he can't do it because he's already developed jaundice. So something that he did not have when he saw me, he's developed a complication, which is jaundice. So that means his liver was failing. Now the reason for this was the tumor was so aggressive that the liver was not able to cope with the radiation treatment, and it started to fail. So he was sitting in front of me, and we were discussing other options. And the only other option is to go for palliative care. So this man won't survive for more than 3 to 6 months. Since the jaundice has set in, it's going to be a slow and progressive course now. He's going to develop fluid in the abdomen. We are at some point going to take out a lot of fluid from his abdomen repeatedly to help him breathe, to help him eat, to help him lie down, sleep. So all of these things are going to happen. I know it because I've been dealing with patients like this for more than a decade, and these are tough patients to manage because medically they are challenging, because we can't offer them any curative treatments because the disease is so far into its natural progression. He regrets drinking alcohol, but there's no point in talking about it now. It was not his fault. A lot of people think an occasional drink or a regular low levels of regular drinking is all fine, but and only heavy drinkers get affected. In fact, this man used to take about 8 to 10 drinks in a week. It's about 30 ml each, which is not like heavy drinking as per the definition, but it's still significant drinking. And it's not just the amount or duration of alcohol that can actually lead to a lot of issues in the liver, including liver cancers and even other problems like stroke or heart disease or high blood pressure. Even other different types of cancers. It also depends on how your genetics is, right? So there are people who have good genetics which protects them from harms of drinking, but the majority are ones who have bad genetics and who get affected with drinking in different forms. So some of them develop stroke, some of them develop pancreatic cancer, some of them develop throat cancer, some of them develop kidney cancer, some of them develop liver cirrhosis, some of them develop liver cancers, some can even develop blood cancers, etc. So alcohol is one of the most potent carcinogens, that is cancer causing substances known to man. So 48 years of age, he has advanced liver cancer. He did not tolerate the only safest treatment option that we could offer him. And now he is on palliative care. But I have not told him that he is on palliative care. I just sent him to my palliative care specialist and put in a word saying that, he is in a denial phase. He is very hopeful. My patient is very hopeful that he's going to survive because he has two teenage girls, and probably of course, he wants to see them get married and do well in life, but he's not going to survive. He's not going to survive. He's going to die in 6 months time, but I need to talk to him about all of this in due course. So if people think that medicine is all about curing diseases, I'm sorry, it's not. Medicine is all about, I think, going on a journey with your patients. It might be a bad journey by the end of it all, and destination is not going to be the nice destination that you or your patient wants it to be, but it's about that journey that you take together, right? And at some point I will tell my patient that he's going to die, and but we make sure that that death is going to be dignified, and that he is not going to suffer. He will be comfortable when death comes for him. And of course we will take care of his family, his wife and the two children. So in the next meeting, I have asked them to ask the wife to bring them also, because there is going to be a deeper talk. And I think, but I've told them to come in 3 to 4 weeks time, but I'm sure he's going to come back earlier because there is some major complication that is going to happen very soon. Uh, and then This was one of the patients that I saw today, and this is not just today, but every day we get to see, or we get to diagnose patients on who are on alcohol. They might not have an alcohol use disorder. They, like you say, the older term for that was alcoholic. So the term is no more used. It's alcohol use disorder. We get occasional drinkers, weekend drinkers, we get monthly drinkers, we get patients who are binge drinkers. That is, they drink continuously for 3 or 4 days and then don't drink at all for a month or so, and then drink again for 3 or 4 days. So all of these patterns of drinking are problematic because alcohol itself is a toxin. We have lost. I mean, I have myself lost. So you can imagine how many doctors are losing so many of these patients. I have myself lost countless numbers of patients because of liver cancer and liver disease due to alcohol consumption. And I get to see this every day, and it's not easy for even doctors to make. First we have to accept that we are going to lose a patient, and then we have to make the patient accept that this is going to be his fate, and then we have to make the family understand that they have to somehow get through that loss, and whatever time was left to make it quality. So the maximum that I do for my patient is to reduce the financial burden, do what is required, so that he'll stay more at home and less in the hospital. And ultimately, when the time comes, we support him, we give him comfort, and make the transition as painless as possible. So this was one of the patients that I saw today, and I wanted to share with you. All of the patients were pretty much, a lot of them were follow-up patients, but they had a lot of new patients who had fatty liver disease. So this is something that we see every day, and something that I'm sure you open social media, YouTube, Instagram, whatever. There'll be some doctor saying, "I'm a gastroenterologist," or "I'm a liver specialist. Here are 5 fruits for your fatty liver. Here are 3 vegetables for your fatty liver, or here is some supplement for your fatty liver." And it's all bullshit. It's all nonsense. And I don't know why it's just 5 fruits. Why can't it be 6 fruits or 4 fruits? Why is it always a vegetable or a fruit? Why can't it be so many other things? And these are just clickbait nonsense, low quality, third rate content. I don't have any 5 numbers of fruits or 10 numbers of vegetables to tell you to reverse your fatty liver or prevent fatty liver. But what I want to tell you practically is what we tell our patients. And I mean, I deal with fatty liver disease every single day, and there are some practical things I always talk to my patients about on fatty liver. And number one is that there is fatty liver disease is a lifestyle disease, and it's not something that you just give some drug or a supplement or ask them to take 5 fruits or 2 vegetables and it's all settled. No, fatty liver disease is something that you need to um work on. So the first prescription for fatty liver is always diet and nutrition and exercise. So in diet and nutrition, some of the points that I tell my patients, especially because we are in Kerala, and depending on the type of food that we have locally sourced, there are some specifics that I talk to them about in the diet per se. And one of them is to avoid coconut oil or limit coconut oil. I don't say avoid except for alcohol and tobacco, but to limit coconut oil, because coconut oil, butter, lard, and ghee. Ghee is basically clarified butter. They are all high in saturated fats, and anything high in saturated fats can actually increase fat deposition in the liver. So we have to limit these saturated fats content, which is why in practical purposes, as a doctor, I advise my patients that they can go for vegetable oils, which is seed oils or refined oils. It's fine. But if you look at social media, they'll fearmonger you, they'll scare you with the exact opposite, saying that coconut is healthy, it is natural, it is ancestral. Your grandmother's mother, and their mothers, they all drank coconut oil, and they were all fine and lived long and happy and all stuff. That's wrong. You have to limit saturated fats, including coconut oil and ghee, and you can use refined oils. And I usually advise my patients to opt for a high-oleic content sunflower oil or canola oil. Even mustard oil is fine. They can go for safflower oil. It's all fine. I mean, these are refined oils which are low in saturated fats, high in PUFA, which is polyunsaturated fatty acids, and MUFA, which is monounsaturated fatty acids. So these are all pretty much healthier for the liver, and that is number one. Number two is I don't I I don't ask them to stop eating junk food. I mean, I don't say, no, never eat a burger or never eat a pizza. It's not like that. They can enjoy some processed food. I mean, there are no actual consensus to exactly how much of processed food you can consume. Every guideline say limit processed foods. Once in a week indulgence is fine, but on a daily basis, it's always good to have fresh meals at home. Reduce consumption of packaged foods, reduce consumption of sugar sweetened beverages, which are very dangerous in the sense that it gives a lot of fructose load to the liver that can affect the metabolism, and it can increase the risk of fatty liver. The third is to have fresh fruit and vegetables and not fruit juice or juice your vegetables. Please don't do that, because juicing vegetables takes out all the good fiber, and juicing fruits takes away the support that fruits have, because fruits also have fructose, but along with the water, the fiber content and everything, fruit has fructose, which does not flood the system. So if you juice it, all that fiber, everything is gone, and it's just like a large flood of fructose into the body. So maybe, as per the guidelines, maybe probably 180 ml of fresh fruit juice twice a week is fine. But otherwise, daily fresh fruit, cut fruits is perfect. The third thing I say is to have coffee. I just had my cup now before I started this session. So I had to have it. Otherwise, it's not easy for me to talk like this after hard days of work. So black coffee, unsweetened, usually 5 grams of instant coffee or 10 grams of brew is perfectly fine. You can take any brand you like. If it's without chicory, it's fine. Chicory is also a prebiotic, which is pretty good. And at least 3 cups a day. One cup is somewhere around 150 to 180 ml. That doesn't matter, because as long as you have 5 to 10 grams of coffee powder in it or coffee content in it, it's fine. Now, even the European Association of Study of Liver, the EASL, which is one of the apex bodies for guidance and recommendations for liver disease diagnosis and management, even they mentioned that uh, patients with chronic liver disease or cirrhosis can consume up to 2 to 3 cups of unsweetened black coffee, because it reduces the risk of liver cancer, which is pretty good. And it's such an easy dietary supplementation that you can have instead of going behind all those detoxes and 3 fruits and 5 fruits people who mislead you on social media. So these are some practical things I advise. And number one is physical activity. At least 154 minutes per week of physical activity is required to stabilize, reverse, or prevent fatty liver, because just physical activity itself is good. You don't need to look like a bodybuilder. Just be very active, and it has to be aerobic activity 154 minutes a week. It helps. I mean, other than this, there are medications for fatty liver, but I think I'll talk about it at some other time, because they are not as important as what lifestyle disease, diet, nutrition, exercise is for fatty liver. So I think that's all for the news today from me. And I'll be back tomorrow, same time, or maybe later, depending on how many patients that I need to see in the OPD. So please remember alcohol, coffee, and what we spoke about, fatty liver. Take care and goodbye.